I'm going to share the ins and outs of producing and directing a £20,000 or approximately $25,000 multicam shoot in a city 5 hours north of the one in which I live. The pre-production, the shoot, and where the money went. It's not often these days when I get jobs through where I play the role of producer. But early last year, I was asked if I wanted to take on a relatively small budgeted job as a directing cinematographer. I said yes, and was effectively handed the whole budget to make it happen. I had initially planned to bring on a producer to help me with everything, but by the time I'd done some rough costings and locations, travel, crew and kit hire, I realised for a producer to get paid what they should be, then either the production would have to take a massive hit, or my rate as a directing cinematographer would have to be a one. So I decided to produce it all myself and make some money. That meant that when the same organisation approached me later in the year with a similar task, I immediately took it upon myself to produce this one too, and they were happy with that based on how well the first one had gone. It effectively cut out what would have become a middleman, and this not being a local job meant one less body that had to be transported and accommodated for. I want to caveat this with the fact that I'm well aware it's not sexy work. It's certainly not the sort of thing that will ever make it into the show reel. I was under no illusion to that going into it. It was 3 separate roundtable discussions about parental problems for a nappy brand, with a tiny bit of B-roll sprinkled in. As I was operating as a subcontracted production company, I started with the idea that I wanted to put a 20% markup across the board, as a production company typically would, which ended up being a bit of a pipe dream. But it's definitely something I'd like to procure more of in the future, as production company markups seem to be the best place to make actual real money in this industry if you're not the on-screen talent. But that was my initial plan. 20% markup and pay everyone full APA rates. And if you don't know what APA rates are, then you should definitely pause this and go and watch the video linked both above and in the description to educate yourself. So 20k becomes 16, and we want 5 cameras, 5 camera operators, ideally a DOP who isn't me if I'm producing and directing, lighting hire, sound operator with kit for 4 on-screen talent, hair and makeup, a runner, a location, food for something like 15, 16 people, and hard drives. Can't forget about the hard drives. I also want to pay myself a director's fee for the shoot day, but also for my pre-production time working on a basic treatment and having a few pre-production meetings ahead of the shoot with agency and client. I should also be paying myself a rate for the days I spent producing, booking kit, crew, accommodation, travel, and ultimately playing the role of art director and prop stylist too, because as we can see, the budget is getting tight. And with only a table and some mugs to source, an art and props person with prep time would have taken us over budget. But then the list of requests started to grow in the lead up. Brand colours on set, flowers, custom made biscuits, a second hair and makeup artist, the talents management, more mouths to feed, a behind the scenes shooter with kit. Being about as far north as people go in England before hitting Scotland, there was only one rental company option, and holding the monopoly, their prices were expensive. A lot more expensive than the rental houses I have relationships with here in London. I'm talking 3 times more for the price of renting a single camera body, at least on the first quote. I thought about bringing all the kit up from London, but the van was already going to be full with props, and I would have had to pay for more days rental to allow for travel time. One thing that I was able to do though, thanks to my new northern saviour, Ali, was hire all local crew. So I only needed to cover travel and accommodation for myself and a producer from the parent production company who was going to be there on the day to help me if I needed anything, and mostly to manage agency. I made the decision that if I could make it work in the budget, Ali was going to DP for me. Less things for me to think about on the day, and he's a talented DP in his own right. This wasn't the type of job that was going to give him much opportunity to shine, but I knew that it would be safe in his hands. As well as helping me with crew recommendations when I'd got the location signed off with the client and agency, Ali also went and recce'd it for me as it wasn't too far from where he's based. The recce was mostly for lighting lookouts anyway, as we really had very little / no other options in the Newcastle area that would tick what we needed space-wise. I had been assured that it would be suitable for sound recording, but regardless, both the location houses that I spoke to and local crew that I spoke to said that there's not really many options in the north. There's a market to be tapped there for sure. This did mean, however, though, that the location house that had this one property that we wanted had me bent over a barrel. And when I tried to negotiate, I was met with a flat no. These are the prices, take it or leave it. And you must sign a contract saying that you will bleed extortionate money if you go over the allotted time. But I did manage to get the rental company to come way down on price, and between myself and Ali, we could cover off a few bits ourselves at a far more budget-friendly rate. As the art directing producer props master, I was going to hire in a round table and chairs, But after getting some initial quotes back from a few prop houses, it was actually going to be £100 cheaper to just buy them, which now means that I have an annoyingly large, oversized piece of round wood sitting in my shed because I couldn't return it afterwards. There didn't seem to be any decent catering options available in the area, so instead I looked at what restaurants were available nearby. For some strange reason, in this part of Newcastle, the first 2 out of 4 places I tried were closed on Mondays and Tuesdays. Fortunately though, the last place I called was open and could accommodate serving this many people at a pre-booked time. And it's always nice to get away from set for lunch too. I kept everything organised in Dropbox as the job progressed. I'd also been proactively working on the call sheet. As everyone and everything was confirmed, I would add them to it. So then when I was ready, it was just a case of adding any last minute details before I sent it out, unusually more than 12 hours before we were actually shooting. Knowing that lots of people, when they're busy working, often really only glance over call sheets and miss a lot of the important stuff, I highlighted the most important things in the email I sent out to everyone that accompanied the call sheet. The shoot was actually one of the smoothest shoots I've ever been a part of. We wrapped nearly 2 hours early. I'm not saying it's because I was producing it, but I was producing it. I'd booked a hotel as close to the location as I could for myself, a luxury 5-minute commute as opposed to the usual hour plus it takes to get anywhere in London. I arrived 30 minutes early, wanting to be there ahead of any other crew members should they arrive early themselves, and also wanting to be unloaded and ready to get in as soon as the clock struck 8. Ahead of time, I'd sent our amazing runner Sam some float money and a list of snacks, drinks, breakfast bits to pick up fresh en route to the shoot. He delivered on all fronts. All of the crew that I'd met previously and Ali's new recommendations were fantastic. No one was precious about just doing their one thing, as I often find on commercial shoots. Everyone was happy to just get stuck in wherever they needed. They were all happy to help move furniture, set up lights, and do what needed to be done, all in a non-stressful and timely manner. It really was that smooth. There's not a lot else to share. I bought a bunch of on-sale camping chairs to allow for the coziest of video villages. We stopped once or twice for airplane flyovers that were bleeding into the sound, but other than that, we got through everything super speedy. Had a banging lunch, shot the B-roll we needed, plus a bunch of extra lines and points the agency wanted to get in there on the day. And then we wrapped early enough that it meant we didn't have to speedily hurry to load out and go into extortionate overtime rates with the location. We weren't actually ever scheduled to do a full APA 10+1 day because realistically I couldn't afford it in the budget with the location. But just in case the worst came to worst, I had scheduled it as a 10+1 day with the crew, so they would hopefully all be happily surprised if and when we eventually wrapped much earlier. I switched hats to DIT upon wrapping, copied all the cards and sent producer Ross off with the master, whilst I drove a horrific 5 hours home in the van with the backup. Short of then chasing everyone for their invoices and paying them over the next few weeks, that was it for me on this job. Everything was over to the post-production house and I was done. The final budget split looked like this. I actually gave hair and makeup slightly more than makeup APA because they were doing a little bit more than just makeup, but they also had a shorter day than everyone else, except for talent, of course. But I thought it best to make sure that I felt everyone was getting paid fairly for their role. Not my usual experience on a job, but one that saw me able to make a decent income and have a really enjoyable time. If you're interested in more money transparency in the industry, then you should definitely watch this playlist here. And if you haven't already, make sure to subscribe for more semi-helpful tips and interesting insider industry knowledge.